What if I told you that the very thing you've been clinging to as your deepest spiritual truth might actually be the final barrier keeping you from it? You've probably heard it again and again, just be the observer. Or maybe you've been told, stay with the sense of, I am. These words sound powerful, don't they? They feel like keys to a secret door, as if the moment you adopt them you've stepped into a higher realm of awareness, and at first, it really does feel that way. You slow down, you watch your thoughts, you anchor yourself in the simple statement, I am, and suddenly, there's a kind of peace. For the first time, you feel like you're not entirely lost in the chaos of your mind. You start to taste something deeper, something beyond the usual noise. That taste is intoxicating. You might feel like you've discovered a hidden treasure, like you've finally been given a solid ground to stand on in a world that often feels confusing and unstable. The idea of being the observer promises freedom from the mess of emotions and stories that drag you around every day. You notice anger arise, and instead of drowning in it, you step back and say, I'm just the witness. You watch sadness move through like a passing storm, and you realize you are not the storm itself. It's liberating, like discovering a secret refuge inside yourself. And with I am, the experience feels even more profound. The phrase is simple, yet expansive. Saying it feels like touching something eternal. You whisper inwardly, I am. And it feels as if you're suddenly grounded in a truth that cannot be shaken. It's no wonder so many teachers throughout history have pointed seekers to this practice. But here's where the illusion begins. If you look closely, you'll see that both the observer and I am are still roles, still subtle identities. They are not the end of the journey, they are stepping stones. At first, they feel like liberation, but soon they can become cages, disguised as freedom. When you cling to being the observer, you're still holding on to an idea of yourself. You've simply replaced the old identity, your job title, your relationships, your stories, with a new one. I am the witness of all things. It seems advanced, it seems spiritual, but it's still just another mask. And the same is true with I am. For many, focusing on I am feels like touching the divine. It feels unshakable, timeless, pure. But notice something. The moment you say I am, who is the one claiming it? Who is holding on to that statement? There's still a subtle self in the background, still a figure trying to own this truth. And as long as there is someone trying to hold on to I am, it hasn't gone far enough. The trap is hidden in plain sight. This is why so many seekers get stuck. They find relief in these practices, and because that relief is so much greater than the suffering they once carried, they mistake it for the ultimate truth. They say, this must be it, this must be enlightenment, and they stop digging deeper. But what if that sense of observer is just another trick of the mind? What if the comfort of I am is just the final illusion before the truth that cannot be named? Think about it. The mind is cunning. It wants to survive at all costs. It will happily give you the identity of the observer, if it means you'll stop questioning further. It will let you rest in I am, if it means you'll stay attached to a subtle form of self. The mind doesn't care if you think you're a millionaire, a failure, an artist, or an enlightened observer. As long as you're still someone, the mind has won. The game continues, and so long as you keep identifying, even with the observer or with I am, you're still trapped. You might ask yourself, but what's wrong with being the observer? Isn't that awareness itself? That's the key distinction. The observer is not pure awareness, it's a position, it's a stance you take in relationship to what's happening. It says, here I am, separate from thoughts and emotions, watching them. That separation feels like freedom compared to identification with the storm of life. But true freedom doesn't require a watcher. True freedom is what remains when there is no watcher at all, only the open expanse of being in which everything arises and falls away. When you cling to I am, it's similar. The words feel grounding, but they still divide you into two, the one who says I am, and the essence the phrase is supposed to point toward. There is still duality hiding in those two little words. And because it feels stable, you don't notice that subtle split. You feel peaceful, but peace that can be claimed is not the ultimate peace. Peace that can be held can just as easily be lost. This is why it's so important to see the trap clearly. The observer and the I am are doorways, not destinations. They open you to something beyond, but if you build your house in the doorway, you'll never step into the vastness of the room that lies beyond. And the reason so many seekers struggle for decades is because they never realize they've mistaken the doorway for the home. They keep polishing the idea of being the witness. They keep repeating the mantra of I am, hoping that one day it will deliver them into the real. But the real is not behind those words. It is what remains when even those words are gone. So let me ask you, what would happen if you stopped clinging to even the observer? What if you let go of I am itself? What's left when there is no stance, no label, no subtle identity to fall back on? At first, it might feel terrifying. Your mind will say, if I'm not even the observer, then I'm nothing. And in a way, that's exactly right. But that nothing is not emptiness in the ordinary sense. It's not a void. It's the fullness that cannot be claimed by any identity. The vastness in which observer, I am, and every concept dissolves. Here's the paradox. The observer and the I am are not wrong, they're just incomplete. They're valuable tools to lead you away from the ordinary identifications of life, your roles, your stories, your constant thoughts. They give you a taste of freedom. But the greatest trap of all is thinking that taste is the feast. You are not the observer. You are not even the I am. You are the unnameable presence that shines when both dissolve. And if you can see this, if you can let go even of the comfort of these partial truths, something extraordinary begins to happen. The search ends. The effort falls away. You stop trying to be anything at all, even the witness. And in that effortless absence, the real reveals itself. Not as something you achieve, not as something you become, but as what you already are, right here, right now, before you ever said a single word about yourself. So, as you sit here listening, notice the thoughts moving. Notice the impulse to identify as the one watching them. Then go further. Drop even that. Rest in what remains. That stillness is not the observer. That silence is not I am. It is beyond both. And once you taste it, you'll know why the biggest illusion isn't the ego, the world, or the mind. It's the belief that you are even the observer of it all. What if you could see that even the most sacred phrases you've repeated for years are still part of the illusion, not because the words lack power, but because the mind takes hold of them and builds a cage out of them? For centuries, sages and masters have directed seekers to turn their attention to the simple sense of I am. They weren't pointing you to words on your lips. They were pointing you to the raw feeling of being that exists before thought, before any role, before any label. When Nisargadatta was told to meditate on I am, his teacher wasn't giving him a mantra to chant like a charm. He was giving him a key to look inward and see what is always here. In his tiny room above a bustling street, he repeated this practice not to strengthen an identity but to dissolve it, to burn away everything that wasn't real. The I am was never meant to be worshipped. It was a doorway to walk through and leave behind. The problem is that when this teaching spread across the world, it was often simplified into a catchphrase. You might have read or heard, "Stay with the I am," and thought that repeating those words was enough. The modern mind craves certainty and technique, so instead of diving into the silence behind the words, many seekers turned the phrase into a mental exercise. They began to hold on to I am, the way a drowning person clutches a piece of driftwood. What was meant to free them became another thing to identify with. Instead of dissolving into awareness, they created a new spiritual identity that whispered, I am this witness, I am this observer, I am this divine spark. And without realizing it, they were still caught in the same net of self-image. Ramana Maharshi also pointed seekers toward the same essence when he asked them to inquire, who am I? His intent was not for you to generate an intellectual answer. It wasn't a question to be solved like a riddle, but a sword to cut through the layers of falsehood. Each time you answer, I am this, or I am that, you are invited to look deeper. Who is the one claiming? Where does that sense of being arise from? If you stay with the inquiry long enough, the mind reaches a limit. There are no more answers, only silence. In that silence, the separate I dissolves and only pure being remains. But again, many misunderstood. They turned the question into a game of concepts. They answered, I am consciousness, I am God, I am awareness. They made a new identity out of what was meant to strip all identity away. The true power of the inquiry is to exhaust the mind, not to feed it with new labels. Think about how the phrase, I am, feels when you say it. At first, it may give you a rush of affirmation, a sense of power. But notice carefully, who is enjoying that affirmation? Isn't it still the ego, dressing itself in spiritual clothing? The mind loves to feel elevated, it loves to declare itself special, and so even the purest teachings can be hijacked. Instead of dissolving into the truth of being, you begin to wear the I am like a badge. You repeat it like a sacred formula. You meditate on it expecting visions or experiences. And yet the deeper message slips past you. The words themselves are never the destination, they were only meant to point you to what cannot be spoken. Imagine a finger pointing toward the moon. If you keep staring at the finger, you miss the radiance of the sky. The phrase, I am, is that finger. It directs your attention inward. But the danger is that you become fascinated with the finger itself. You polish it, you decorate it, you argue about its meaning. All the while the moon shines silently, waiting for you to look. This is the trap of repeating, I am, without seeing what it points to. Instead of opening into boundless awareness, you remain fixated on the concept. You chant it, you defend it, you teach it. But the actual presence behind it remains untouched. What the sages knew is that your sense of being, I am, is the first ripple of consciousness. It appears spontaneously upon waking, before your mind fills with stories of who you are. They asked you to rest there, to notice that raw being. But they also urged you not to stop there, because even that sense of I am arises and disappears. It comes in the morning when you wake, and it vanishes in deep sleep. How can that be the ultimate truth if it is temporary? The truth must be prior to even this sense of existence. That is why Nisargadatta said, stay with the I am until it dissolves. He knew that the practice would eventually collapse into the vastness beyond being and non-being. The words were never sacred in themselves, only the silence they revealed. If you look honestly, you can see how easy it is to become trapped in spiritual repetition. You may sit and whisper, I am, I am, I am, like a mantra. You may feel peaceful or uplifted for a time. But peace that depends on words is fragile. The real freedom does not come from repeating a phrase, but from letting go of every phrase. The I am was meant to be a thorn to remove another thorn. Once it has done its work, you drop it. You don't carry it around and build a shrine to it. To cling to I am is to stop halfway across the bridge. The sages wanted you to walk all the way across, to the other side where there are no bridges and no travelers. You might wonder why so many have misunderstood. The answer is simple. The mind craves security. It wants something it can hold on to. And so when a teacher points you towards silence, the mind grabs the nearest word and clings to it. It takes I am and builds a belief system around it. It turns it into a teaching, a community, a ritual. But the truth cannot be contained in these forms. The truth is alive, immediate, ungraspable. You cannot hold it with a word any more than you can hold the wind in your hand. And yet, that is what happens when you mistake the pointer for the destination. The danger of misunderstanding is subtle but real. As long as you identify with I am as a phrase, you remain in duality. There is still a you affirming something. There is still a subject and object. But when the words fall away and only silence remains, the illusion of separation collapses. You are no longer a seeker repeating, I am. You are the boundless presence that doesn't need affirmation. You don't have to say, I am, because being itself shines without words. So the invitation is this. Stop clinging to the repetition. Use it as long as it helps you turn inward, but don't mistake it for the final step. Notice the raw sense of being that arises when you wake in the morning. Rest in it. And then notice that even this sense of I am is known by something deeper, something that doesn't come and go, something that doesn't need to be named. That is the true essence the sages were pointing to. When you realize this, the words fall away naturally. You no longer need to say, I am, because you have discovered the wordless reality it was pointing toward all along. Have you ever wondered why, even after stepping into the role of the observer, there's still a faint sense of distance between you and the truth you're searching for. At first, the practice of witnessing feels like liberation. You notice thoughts pass through like clouds, emotions come and go like waves, and instead of being tossed around by them, you find yourself watching calmly from the shore. This is powerful, isn't it? It feels like the chaos of life finally loosens its grip. You no longer drown in anger or sorrow. You say to yourself, "I'm the witness, I am untouched." That discovery is life-changing. It feels as though you've pulled back the curtain on a hidden strength inside you. But the more closely you examine it, the more you begin to see that the role of observer is not the final truth. It's another mask, another subtle identity that the mind slips into, all in the name of freedom. The moment you say, "I am the witness," you've already created separation. You've positioned yourself as someone distinct from what is happening, standing outside of experience. On the surface, this feels safe, even sacred. But ask yourself, who exactly is the one witnessing? Who is that silent figure standing behind the curtain of thoughts? The mind is clever. It wants to keep its hold in any way it can. If it can't keep you fully lost in thoughts, it will happily give you a new role, the role of the witness. You feel lighter, but the truth is you've just traded one mask for another. It's easy to overlook this trap, because witnessing feels so much better than the constant identification with your stories. When you see yourself as the observer, you no longer ride the storm of emotions. You stand apart, detached, free. But notice the subtlety. There's still a you in that scenario. There's still a position, still someone claiming to stand outside the storm. And that someone is precisely the illusion. As long as there is a witness, there is division, one who sees, and something being seen. This duality keeps the game alive. True awareness isn't divided. It doesn't set up camp on one side of the experience, watching the other side unfold. It doesn't need a stance or a position. It doesn't need to say, "I'm here," and thoughts are there. Pure awareness is seamless. It's the space in which both the thought and the so-called witness appear. It doesn't take sides. It doesn't separate itself from what arises. When you hold on to being the observer, you subtly cling to division. And division, no matter how subtle, is still the seed of suffering. Imagine sitting in silence and watching your thoughts. A stream of images and words moves across your inner screen, and you tell yourself, "I am the witness." For a while, it feels liberating. But dig deeper. That very act of labeling yourself the witness creates an identity, and identity is always fragile. It has to be maintained. If you are the witness, you must keep watching. If you're the observer, you must keep separating yourself from what arises. And in that constant effort, there is still bondage. Freedom doesn't require you to hold a role. It doesn't require effort. It is what you are when every role collapses. Think about the way the mind works. It never wants to give up completely. It always wants to grasp at something. When you let go of being the thinker, it offers you the witness. When you let go of being the doer, it says, "Fine, then be the watcher." And if you don't see the trick, you'll settle there, convinced you've arrived. But awareness has no need for positions. It is not over here, watching over there. It is boundless. It contains both observer and observed, without preference or separation. Ask yourself honestly, who is the observer? If you look closely, you'll see it is just another thought, another subtle image of yourself. You can imagine yourself as a detached presence, hovering behind your experiences. But isn't that still imagination? Isn't that still a concept playing in the mind? If you strip it down, you'll see that the witness is just another character, no different from the angry self, the happy self, the spiritual self. The costume has changed, but the actor behind it hasn't been seen through, and as long as the actor remains, you haven't touched the real. This is why clinging to the observer keeps you stuck. It feels peaceful, but it's a limited peace, dependent on a position, and whatever is dependent can collapse. The moment a strong wave of pain or fear arises, the identity of the witness is challenged. Suddenly, you're back in the storm, wondering why your freedom was lost. That's because true freedom was never in the stance of the observer. True freedom is in what you are before you take any stance at all. To see this clearly, Try an experiment. Right now, notice a thought arising. Maybe it's about what you'll eat later, or about the words you're hearing. Watch it, as you've been taught, as the observer. But now take it one step further. Ask, who is it that is observing? Can you find a figure, a location, a self? The moment you search for the witness, it vanishes. There is only awareness itself, open, centerless, beyond division. That's the key. When you drop the idea of being the witness, awareness shines by itself, effortlessly. You don't need to be someone who is aware. Awareness is not owned. It's not a personal achievement. It is what everything arises in. The witness is like a cloud that passes across the sky, and the sky is pure awareness. For a time, the cloud gives you perspective. It shields you from being lost in storms. But eventually, you must see that even the cloud is not the whole sky. Let it dissolve, and the vast expanse is revealed. This can be unsettling at first. The mind will protest. It will say, if I'm not even the observer, then who am I? That question is exactly where freedom begins. Because the answer is not another identity. The answer is silence. The answer is the recognition that you are not someone at all. You are not the thinker, not the doer, not even the witness. You are the pure being in which all of these roles rise and fall. When you truly grasp this, the tension of trying to maintain the role of observer falls away. You don't have to hold yourself apart from thoughts. You don't have to keep repeating, I'm just the witness. You don't have to make effort to stand outside of experience. Experience simply flows, and awareness holds it all, without needing a separate identity to manage it. This is freedom, not a fragile position, but the effortless openness that remains when all positions are dropped. So the next time you sit quietly and tell yourself you are the observer, question it. Don't stop at the relief of witnessing, look deeper. See that the witness itself is an appearance, no different from the thoughts it watches. Let go of that subtle mask, and notice what's left. What's left is not a role, not a stance, not a subtle identity. What's left is what has always been here, boundless awareness, whole and indivisible. And in that recognition, the game of separation comes to an end. If you look closely at how your mind operates, you will see that it never wants to rest in silence. It always wants to play a role. Even when you think you are breaking free from the ego, the mind cleverly creates a new mask to wear. You say to yourself, I am the observer, I am the witness, I am the thinker, I am the dreamer. Each of these roles feels like progress compared to being fully lost in the noise of thoughts, but in reality they are still forms of identity. They give you a sense of being someone in control, someone awakened, someone special. And that is exactly how the ego survives. It doesn't matter to the ego whether you call yourself a businessman, a mother, a victim, or a spiritual seeker. As long as you are something, it can continue to exist. That is why the prison of identity is so subtle. It doesn't just trap you in obvious roles, but in spiritual ones as well. Consider how often you catch yourself thinking of life as a stage where you must play a part. You wake up and immediately put on the role of worker or partner or parent. You may later put on the role of meditator or seeker. The mind insists that you must always be something, because to simply rest as nothing terrifies it. Nothingness is the end of its games. So it creates layer after layer of subtle identifications. I am the one who is observing. I am the one who understands non-duality. I am the one who is detached. Each time you adopt such a stance, you feel secure, but that security is false. It is only the ego trying to anchor itself in a new disguise. Think of how seductive the role of the observer can feel. You are told that you are not your thoughts, but the one who watches them. This can feel liberating at first, like you have stepped back from the storm and found refuge in a safe shelter. But the subtle trap is that the observer is still a position, still an identity. You are still saying, I am this, not that. That division is the seed of duality. The observer cannot exist without the observed. If you cling to the identity of observer, you must also unconsciously cling to the world of objects, because the two depend on each other. And so the ego has not been dissolved, it has simply refined itself. The same is true when you call yourself the thinker. You may pride yourself on your insights, on your spiritual understanding. You feel that you are evolving, that you can explain reality, that you have read the right books and grasped the hidden truths. But notice what is happening beneath the surface. The identity of thinker keeps the ego alive by placing you in the position of being the one who knows. And if you are the one who knows, others must be the ones who do not know. That comparison feeds separation. You end up reinforcing the very wall you are trying to tear down. Even the role of dreamer has its trap. You may tell yourself that life is but a dream, that you are the one experiencing it. At first, this feels like awakening to something vast and mysterious. Yet, by claiming the role of dreamer, you are still drawing a line between yourself and the dream. You are still asserting that there is a you standing apart from what unfolds. That subtle division is enough to keep the sense of self alive. It feels profound, but it is only another mask. And then there is the doer. You may imagine that you are the one choosing, the one manifesting, the one creating your reality through intention. While this can feel empowering, it still creates bondage, because it maintains the belief that there is an individual self directing the show. Whether you call yourself a successful doer or a spiritual doer, the mechanism is the same. There is still a you clinging to a role. And as long as there is a role, there is a prison. Why does the mind keep inventing these roles? Because without them, it feels like it will vanish. Identity is its fuel. If you were to stop identifying with anything, even the observer, or the I am, the mind would lose its anchor. That prospect terrifies it, so it cleverly offers you spiritual positions that feel safe. It whispers, "You are the witness. You are the higher self. You are pure awareness." These ideas seem noble, but they are still roles. They still keep you within the framework of duality, and duality is the ego's oxygen. Without it, the entire illusion collapses. The phrase, "I am," is one of the most subtle traps of all. On the surface, it seems to be the doorway into truth. You declare, "I am," and you rest in that sense of being. At first it feels pure, like you have reached the foundation of existence. But the danger is that the I am becomes another identity, another anchor for the ego. When you say, "I am," there is still an assumption that there is someone existing, someone with a center. Even if you strip away the labels of mother, father, worker, or seeker, the very notion of "I am" still implies a subject who exists in contrast to objects. And as long as that contrast remains, duality continues. This is why the teaching goes further than simply resting in the I am. The sages who pointed you to the sense of I am never meant for you to stop there. They wanted you to see through it. They wanted you to recognize that even the sense of existence is a temporary appearance. It arises in waking and fades in deep sleep. It is not the ultimate truth, it is a doorway. But many seekers have turned the doorway into a house and made themselves comfortable inside. They repeat, I am, as though the repetition itself is liberation, but in reality, it is just another wall in the prison of identity. What you must see is that the prison bars are not made of steel, they are made of words and concepts. Each time you say, I am this, or I am that, you build another bar. Even when you say, I am nothing, or I am awareness, you are still forging bars. They are subtle, they shimmer like gold, they feel lofty, but they are bars nonetheless. True freedom is not found in declaring an identity, even a spiritual one. True freedom comes when there is no identity at all, when you no longer need to call yourself anything. Imagine for a moment what it feels like when you stop labeling yourself. No observer, no thinker, no doer, not even I am, just the open, wordless presence that requires no definition. That is the space beyond the prison. In that space, you cannot be trapped, because there is no you to trap. The ego dissolves, not because it was conquered, but because it has nothing left to cling to. The roles fall away, and with them, the illusion of separation. So the great illusion is not just in the obvious identifications of daily life, it is in the subtle spiritual identities that seem like progress but are still traps. As long as you cling to being the observer, or the I am, you remain within duality. You may feel safer, clearer, even enlightened, but you are still within the prison. Only when you see that every role is a disguise does the cage begin to fall apart, And then you discover that the truth is not something you can name or claim. It is not, I am this, or I am that. It is the silence that exists before the words arise. It is the presence that doesn't need a role. That is where freedom lives, in the space where there is nothing to identify with at all. Have you ever noticed how quick your mind is to name everything? A sound outside, and instantly it becomes a car. A sensation in your chest, and it is labeled anxiety. A thought arises, and it becomes mine. This constant labeling gives you the impression that you are in control, that you understand what's happening. But what if I told you that every single label, even the ones that seem deeply spiritual, are part of the same trap? The mind doesn't care whether it's attaching the label of failure or the label of observer. It doesn't care if it says, I am sad, or I am awareness. Both are just stamps pressed onto an ever-flowing reality. Both keep you bound inside a web of names and concepts. And here's the truth you might find hard to accept. Your essence is not contained in any of them. When you look at your experience honestly, you'll see that the moment a label is applied, the freshness of reality is already lost. The actual sound, the raw sensation, the pure presence of what's here, is immediately filtered and reduced into a word. That word is a shadow, not the thing itself. Imagine holding a rose. You can call it rose 1,000 times, but none of those syllables will ever carry its fragrance. The label is not the reality. The same is true for you. The moment you say, I am this, or I am that, you've stepped away from the immediacy of your true essence. You've turned yourself into a word, an idea, an image, and yet you are the silent reality that cannot be captured by any of it. This is why even the most elevated spiritual phrases can become a cage. Saying, I am, can feel powerful. Repeating, I am light, or I am divine, can feel uplifting. And in the beginning, these affirmations might help you loosen the grip of more negative identifications. But if you hold onto them too tightly, they become just as binding as the words you thought you escaped. The mind is clever. It will let go of one label only to hand you another that looks shinier, more enlightened. You might drop, I am unworthy, and pick up, I am awakened. You might release, I am broken, and grab onto, I am healed. And while these feel better, they are still labels. They are still concepts. They are still part of the same addiction to defining yourself through thought. Your true nature is not a phrase. It is not a mantra. It is not even the highest teaching. It is what remains when all of that falls silent. Think about it. When you were a child, before you could even form words, you were. You existed in pure being without needing to call yourself anything at all. You didn't need to say, I am a boy, I am a girl, I am worthy, or I am unworthy. You simply were. That simple beingness is still here, untouched by all the names and roles you've piled on top of it. You've just forgotten how to rest in it without dressing it up with concepts. The addiction to labels runs deep because it gives the mind a sense of security. To name something is to feel as though you've grasped it. If you call yourself the witness, it feels like you've finally found a solid identity. If you call yourself consciousness, you feel safe in that position. But reality doesn't need your labels. It was here long before you tried to define it, and it will continue long after you've dropped all attempts to describe it. The mind believes it can pin down life with words, but life keeps flowing, uncatchable, unnameable. Breaking free from this addiction is not about violently rejecting every word or refusing to ever use language again. Language is useful. It helps you navigate the practical aspects of living. But the shift happens when you no longer confuse the word with the reality. You can say sky, but you know the word is not the vast expanse overhead. You can say I aim, but you know those letters are not the living presence that breathes through you. Once you see this clearly, the grip of labels begins to loosen. Try watching your mind for a moment. A thought arises. I am tired. Pause there. Instead of clinging to the label, look at the raw sensation underneath. What is tiredness without the word? Perhaps it's a heaviness in the eyes, a slowing of the body, a pull to rest. These sensations are alive, fluid, changing moment by moment. The label tired freezes them, makes them seem solid. But without the label, the experience is free to flow as it island. The same applies to deeper identifications. When you say, "I am unworthy," notice the feelings beneath the words: a contraction in the chest, a heat in the stomach, a sense of sinking. Without the label, it is just energy moving. The label is what gives it the power to define you. Now look at the spiritual labels. I am the observer. What lies beneath that thought? A sense of space, a recognition that you are not entangled in the story. But then the mind rushes in to claim it, to stamp it with a title: I am the observer. Suddenly, you're not just open space, you're a character again, one with a spiritual mask. See how quickly the trap is set? If you let the raw recognition remain without turning it into a concept, you rest as awareness itself, not as someone claiming to be aware. Your essence is beyond all of this. It doesn't need a label to be real. It doesn't need a mantra to exist. It doesn't depend on being recognized as divine or light or observer. It's simply island. And the only reason you don't feel it more often is because the mind is busy scribbling names over every moment. It's like staring at a window covered in sticky notes. The view is still there, vast and open, but all you see are the words pasted on the glass. When you peel them off, even for a moment, reality shines through with a clarity that no label could ever describe. The challenge is that the mind will fight to keep labeling. It feels naked without a definition. It doesn't know how to rest in pure being. But you can retrain it gently. Every time you notice a label arising, pause, look beneath it. See the living reality it tries to reduce, and then let the label dissolve, like a cloud passing through the sky. The more you do this, the more you begin to trust what is beyond thought. You realize that labels are flimsy, they come and go, but what you are never moves. This realization is not about adopting a new spiritual slogan. It is about breaking the cycle of slogans altogether. You don't need to say, "I am awareness," to be awareness. You don't need to chant, "I am light," to shine. You don't need to declare, "I am free," to be free. Freedom doesn't need an announcement. Truth doesn't require a label. The deepest essence of who you are has never once called itself anything, and yet it has always been present. When you see this clearly, something inside relaxes. The pressure to maintain a spiritual identity falls away. You don't need to keep affirming, declaring, or reminding yourself. You don't need to cling to inner mantras like life rafts. You realize that the ocean itself was always carrying you, and the raft was never necessary. This doesn't mean you abandon every tool. It means you no longer confuse the tool for the truth. You use words when needed, but you don't get lost in them. So let me ask you, who would you be without labels? Without calling yourself a thinker, a seeker, a healer, a witness, or even a soul? Who would you be without even the word me? The answer is not something you can put into language. The answer is the silence you feel right now as you hear these words. It is the space between thoughts. It is the presence in which every label arises and disappears. And once you taste it, even for an instant, you'll know. You are not the labels. You never were. You are the boundless being those labels can never touch. When you first step onto the path of self-discovery, it feels like you have finally found something meaningful, something that can lead you beyond the surface distractions of the world. You may begin with meditation, affirmations, or self-inquiry. You may discover the teaching of I am, or the idea of becoming the observer. At first, these practices feel like doorways opening into a greater reality. They calm your mind, they expand your awareness, they give you glimpses of peace. But if you look deeply, you will see that the very act of clinging to these practices can turn into another form of bondage. The mind, always hungry for roles, transforms these sacred tools into another chase, another identity, another endless journey. What was meant to liberate you becomes the very thing that keeps you bound. You may find yourself repeating, I am, like a mantra, believing that the more you affirm it, the closer you come to truth. You may sit for hours watching your thoughts and labeling yourself as the witness, believing that the act of observing itself is enlightenment. But have you noticed how the seeker in you never feels satisfied? No matter how long you sit, no matter how many affirmations you chant, there is always a subtle sense of incompleteness. The mind whispers, you are getting closer, but not yet. And so you continue the chase, thinking tomorrow will bring the breakthrough that today did not. This is the illusion of progress. It keeps you moving, but it never lets you arrive. The truth is not something that grows larger with repetition. It is not something that accumulates like wealth or knowledge. It is not the reward at the end of a long, disciplined effort. The reality you seek is already here, waiting in the stillness beneath your striving. But the seeker in you refuses to believe this, because if truth is already here, the seeker has no purpose. And so the seeker creates the illusion of a path, of gradual improvement, of milestones. It convinces you that enlightenment is something to earn, something to deserve, something that can be achieved through years of practice. This belief feeds the ego in its most refined form. Instead of worldly success, you chase spiritual success. Instead of money or fame, you collect spiritual experiences. Yet the game is the same. You may feel proud that you have meditated every morning for a year, or that you can recite sacred texts, or that you can remain detached in situations that once triggered you. These may look like progress, but ask yourself honestly, who is the one keeping score? Who is the one measuring achievement? Is it not still the same mind, the same identity that needs to define itself as advanced, as awakened, as closer to the goal? And if that identity is still active, has the prison really been broken? The truth cannot be earned like a trophy. It reveals itself only when you stop reaching for it. It is not that practices are useless. They can prepare the soil, they can point your attention inward, they can still the turbulence long enough for clarity to shine. But the danger comes when you mistake the finger for the moon. If you believe the practice itself is the truth, you become trapped in endless repetition. You may sit for decades, watching your breath, repeating, I am, identifying as the observer, and yet never step beyond, because the very effort you put forth becomes a veil. The seeker thrives on effort, on the idea of doing something. But truth does not belong to effort. It is already here, before effort, beneath effort, untouched by whether you practice or not. Think of a person who constantly polishes a mirror. They believe that if they polish long enough, eventually the mirror will reveal something extraordinary. They polish day after day, month after month, becoming experts in technique, discussing with others the best way to hold the cloth. Yet, all along, the mirror was already clear. The endless polishing was unnecessary. It did not create the reflection. It only distracted from the simple act of looking. This is what happens when you chase the I am, or the observer, as practices rather than seeing what they point to. You polish and polish, but you never look. The illusion of progress is seductive because it gives the ego something to cling to. It whispers that you are better today than yesterday, and that tomorrow you will be even better. It tells you that if you meditate a little longer, study a little harder, discipline yourself a little more, enlightenment will finally arrive. But truth does not arrive in the future. It is not the outcome of time. It is timeless, present, here and now. To postpone it to the future is to miss it entirely. You cannot progress toward what you already are. The only distance between you and truth is the belief that there is distance at all. Many seekers fear letting go of practice, because they believe they will regress, that they will fall back into unconsciousness. But what is unconsciousness other than identification with roles and thoughts? The practice can sometimes reinforce that very identification by keeping you in the role of the seeker. You become the one who practices, the one who observes, the one who affirms, I am, and that identity is just as binding as the identity of being a worker or a parent. The mind does not care whether it calls itself worldly or spiritual, it only cares that it continues to exist. By clinging to practice as identity, you feed the very illusion you are trying to escape. The sages who gave these teachings never meant for them to become lifelong crutches. When they told you to focus on the sense of, I am, it was not so you could repeat it forever, but so you could see what lies behind it. When they told you to witness your thoughts, it was not so you could eternally sit as the observer, but so that the observer itself could dissolve. The practices are tools, not homes. They are bridges, not destinations. If you build a house on the bridge, you remain suspended in the middle, never reaching the shore. The real discovery happens when you stop chasing altogether. When you sit in the silence without trying to observe, without trying to repeat, without trying to achieve, you notice something astonishing. Awareness is already present. Being is already here. It does not need your effort to exist. It does not need your affirmation to shine. It does not depend on your discipline, your progress, or your role. It is the ground upon which all of these appear. In that moment, the illusion of progress collapses, and you see that you were never moving toward truth, you were always moving within it. This is why truth cannot be earned. Effort belongs to the realm of becoming. Truth belongs to the realm of being. Becoming always implies a future. Being is eternal presence. The more you try to become enlightened, the more you push it into the future, and the further you seem from it. But the moment you let go of effort, the moment you stop trying to arrive, you realize you were never separate. The treasure was always buried in the ground beneath your feet. Your endless searching only distracted you from noticing. So ask yourself now, who is the one seeking? Who is the one practicing? Who is the one keeping score of progress? The more deeply you examine, the more you see that it is only the mind constructing another identity. And as long as that identity remains, the prison remains. The practices may soften the walls, they may decorate the cell, they may give you hope, but they do not set you free. True freedom comes when the seeker itself dissolves, when you stop chasing shadows and rest in the light that is already shining. The trap of spiritual practice is not in the practice itself, but in your attachment to it. Use it as a tool, but do not worship it. Let it point you inward, but do not stop at the pointer. See that the truth is not the observer, not the affirmation of, I am, not the hours of meditation, but the simple, undeniable presence that exists before all of these. When you rest there, you realize you have never been bound, and you have never needed to seek. The illusion of progress fades, and what remains is the direct realization that truth has always been here, waiting for you to stop chasing and simply see. What if I told you that the freedom you've been searching for doesn't arrive as an achievement, a title, or a realization you can hold in your hand, but rather as the quiet falling away of everything you thought you were? You've learned to step back from your thoughts, to take the position of the observer. You've learned to anchor in the sense of, I am, to feel it as a grounding in your being. But what happens when even those dissolves? What happens when you stop clinging to the witness, when you let go of even the sacred identity of I am? What remains is not emptiness in the way your mind fears it. What remains is pure awareness itself, direct and undeniable, shining without needing to be claimed. At first, this can feel disorienting. Your mind wants to hold on to something. It craves an identity, even if that identity is subtle and spiritual. To be the observer feels safe. To rest in I am feels holy. But both of those are still positions. They still leave you standing apart, as someone who is something. When those masks drop, there is no position left to hold. There is no figure behind the curtain, no center that can be pointed to and named. And strangely, instead of being a terrifying void, what reveals itself is the most natural thing you've ever known. It is the silence that has always been here, the ground that never moved, no matter what thoughts or identities danced on its surface. This silence cannot be captured by the mind. Try to hold it, and it slips through your fingers. Try to name it, and it becomes just another concept. The moment you call it awareness, or being, or consciousness, you've already stepped back into thought. And yet, even as you label it, it remains untouched beneath the words. It is like trying to grasp the space in a room. You can describe the walls, the floor, the objects, but the space itself is never something you can seize. Still, without it, nothing else could exist. In the same way, pure awareness is the space in which all arises. Thoughts, emotions, sensations, even the identity of the witness itself. If you sit quietly and let every role fall away, you may notice something extraordinary. There is stillness here that is not created by practice. It is not the result of concentration or effort. It's simply island, and in that stillness, there is no need for a you to maintain it. You are not sitting there as a character saying, I am now aware. There is only awareness itself, effortless and radiant, containing everything without being touched by anything. This direct glimpse is unlike anything the mind can imagine. It is not dramatic. It is not filled with fireworks. It is quiet, ordinary in its obviousness, and yet it is the most profound recognition possible. How does it feel? It feels like coming home after lifetimes of pretending to be someone else. It feels like the end of striving, because there is nothing left to attain. You realize that you don't need to become awareness. You already are it. The search collapses in on itself. The seeker disappears, and what's left is what has always been, the unbroken presence in which both seeker and search appeared and dissolved. In this direct awareness, there is no separation. There is no witness standing apart from what is seen. The division of subject and object, self and world, melts away. There is only the seamless flow of life as it is, appearing and disappearing in the vastness that cannot be disturbed. This isn't something distant or abstract. It is available right now, in the space where you are reading these words. Notice. Even as thoughts arise about understanding, about agreeing or disagreeing, about wanting more, there is something already here that is aware of them. That awareness does not move. It does not change when the thought changes. It does not depend on effort or on identity. The mind will try to claim it. It will whisper, "I am awareness." But notice, the moment it speaks, there is already a subtle split. Awareness itself doesn't need to say a word. It doesn't need to declare its existence. It's simply island. You don't need to hold on to it with mantras. You don't need to defend it with concepts. You don't need to fear losing it. It is what everything arises in, including the idea of losing it. This glimpse reveals something crucial. You are not an entity inside awareness. You are not a person who happens to be aware. You are awareness itself, boundless, centerless, without identity. This realization is not cold or impersonal. On the contrary, it is suffused with a quiet warmth, a gentle intimacy. Because in awareness, nothing is outside of you. Every sound, every face, every sensation is included. There is no longer a wall between you and the world. What you once called out there is recognized as inseparable from what you are. The beauty of this recognition is in its simplicity. You don't need to chase mystical experiences. You don't need to pile up teachings. You don't need to cling to practices. All of those can be helpful along the way, but the direct awareness you are looking for is here before, during, and after all of them. It does not come and go. What comes and goes are only appearances, the clouds of thought, the rolls of identity, the waves of emotion. The sky of awareness never moves. When you touch this directly, life takes on a different quality. Fear begins to lose its grip because you see that nothing can threaten what you are. Thoughts of gain and loss, success and failure, rise and fall like echoes, but the awareness they rise in remains untouched. Even death, which once loomed as the great terror, is revealed to be just another appearance. Awareness is not born, and it does not die. It does not start with your body, and it does not end with it. It simply is, timeless, limitless, undeniable. The silence of pure awareness is not passive. It is full, alive, vibrant. It is not dull emptiness. It is the richness that makes every moment possible. When you rest as this, you don't withdraw from life. On the contrary, life flows more freely through you. Because you no longer stand apart as the observer, there is nothing blocking the movement of being. You feel yourself as the very fabric of existence, the pulse of the present moment in every breath, every sound, every sensation. This is why all the labels fall short. No word can capture this. No concept can contain it. The moment you try to explain it, you've already stepped away. But the beauty is that you don't need to explain it. You don't need to describe it to yourself or to anyone else. You only need to rest in it, silently, without reaching for anything. And the more you rest here, the more you see that it has always been carrying you. You didn't earn it. You didn't create it. You simply uncovered what was never absent. So pause now, in this very moment. Let go of the effort to be the observer. Release the need to hold on to I am. Let the mind fall quiet. Don't try to grab the silence. Don't try to name it. Just notice the awareness that is already here, still, open, beyond identity. This is the direct glimpse of pure awareness. It is not something far away. It is not something that arrives in the future. It is here now, shining quietly in the background of every thought, every sensation, every breath. It is what you have always been, what you will always be, what can never be lost. And once you see it, even for an instant, you cannot unsee it. You may get lost again in thoughts, in roles, in identities, but the recognition leaves a trace. It calls you back again and again until you realize there is nowhere to return to, because you never left. Awareness was always here, silently waiting, needing nothing, claiming nothing, being everything. When you begin to look at the sense of I am with fresh eyes, you notice that it is inseparably tied to time. The moment you wake in the morning, there it is. The recognition that you exist, the feeling that you are here. But in deep sleep, where is it? It disappears without leaving a trace. It arises again only when consciousness lights up with the thought, I am. This shows you something essential, that the I am is not the eternal ground of being but a temporary appearance within time. It begins, it ends. It depends on memory to string itself together into a story. When you say, I am this person, I am this body, I am this identity, you are calling upon memory to validate your claim. Without memory, without time, the phrase, I am, loses its meaning. Consider how much of your identity is woven out of the threads of time. You remember being a child, you remember certain events, you remember choices, mistakes, and victories. All of these memories gather to form the sense of a self that has continued across years. This self appears consistent only because memory serves as the glue. In truth, each moment is new, but memory gives the illusion of continuity. When you say, I am this, you are leaning on memory, on the past, to justify the present claim. Without that memory, who are you? Without recalling yesterday, what is left of the story you carry so tightly? Even the simple affirmation, I am, is never outside of time. It only appears in waking consciousness, and it is gone in deep sleep. That means it arises within time, not beyond it. You may think of the I am as permanent, but in fact it is as fleeting as any thought. The only difference is that it appears more consistently, so you mistake it for reality itself. But pure awareness is not bound in this way. Pure awareness does not rise and fall with waking and sleeping. It does not depend on memory to validate itself. It is not something you need to recall or repeat. It is the timeless backdrop upon which time and memory unfold. You can see this directly if you observe carefully. When a memory arises, what notices it? Awareness. When the sense of I am arises in the morning, what knows it? Awareness. When it fades at night, what remains untouched? Awareness. This is the key to dissolving the illusion. The sense of self that depends on time and memory is not the final truth. It is an appearance within the eternal. It is like a wave rising from the ocean, appearing for a while, then dissolving back. The ocean remains, timeless, while the wave comes and goes. Your true nature is not the wave of I am, but the ocean of awareness in which it arises. The mind resists this realization because the mind itself is structured by time. It cannot imagine existence without past and future. It cannot grasp timelessness, so it builds a sense of self entirely out of time. It says, this is who I was, this is who I am now, this is who I will be. It projects identity into past and future, stringing together a narrative that feels solid but is actually fragile. The mind insists that you are this story, and the more you believe it, the more you become a prisoner of time. You worry about the past, you fear the future, you cling to identity as though it were fixed. But none of this is true. All of it is imagination, appearing moment by moment within the timeless field of awareness. When you begin to see that awareness itself is timeless, something extraordinary happens. You stop searching for truth in the future. You stop trying to hold on to identity from the past. You realize that what you are looking for is here already, outside of time. Awareness has no beginning, no end. It does not need a memory to confirm itself. You can test this now. Sit quietly and notice the space of knowing in which these words appear. This knowing has always been present, even when you were not paying attention to it. It does not depend on thought. It does not depend on identity. It's simply island. This is why the sages called it timeless. Because it is here before thought says, I am. And it remains when thought falls silent. The illusion of time in awakening is powerful because you believe awakening is a process, something that will happen in the future if you work hard enough. You think, one day I will awaken, one day I will understand, one day I will be free. But as long as awakening is projected into the future, you will never reach it. Awakening is not an event within time. It is the recognition of what is beyond time. It does not unfold step by step. It is not earned like a degree. It is the sudden realization that what you have been seeking has always been here. It is seeing that the future self you hope to become is just as illusory as the past self you cling to. So how do you dissolve the illusion of past and future self? First, you notice that both past and future are thoughts arising now. When you remember something from the past, where does it appear? In your present awareness. When you imagine the future, where does that appear? Again, in present awareness. Past and future never exist outside of thought. They are stories created in the now. Once you see this clearly, you stop being bound by them. You realize that the self you think you were is just a collection of memories replayed in the present. The self you think you will be is just imagination projected forward. Both are shadows. The only reality is the awareness here and now, timeless and unchanging. This does not mean you lose all sense of memory or stop planning for the future. It means you no longer mistake those thoughts for your true identity. You can use memory as a tool, but you no longer believe it defines you. You can plan for tomorrow, but you no longer believe your freedom depends on tomorrow. You know that what you are is not contained in time. You are the timeless presence in which time itself appears. This recognition dissolves the prison of becoming. You no longer chase after a future version of yourself. You no longer carry the burden of past stories. You rest in the presence that is here now. The illusion of time is what makes the path of awakening feel endless. You believe you must progress, you must evolve, you must achieve. But all of that assumes a timeline, assumes a self that travels from ignorance to enlightenment. Look closely and see that the self who thinks it is traveling is itself just a thought. The idea of progress is just another story in time. The truth does not need progress. The truth is whole and complete in every moment. It does not become more true tomorrow. It does not become less true yesterday. It's simply island. When you recognize this, the search collapses, and what remains is the timeless awareness you have always been. So notice now, the sense of I am is tied to time. It arises with waking, disappears in sleep, and leans on memory to sustain itself. Pure awareness is different. It does not arise or fade. It is here when the sense of self is present, and it is here when the sense of self is absent. It is timeless, and when you stop clinging to the illusion of time, you recognize yourself as that awareness. You see that you were never the past self, never the future self. You were never even the present self. You are the presence in which all selves appear and vanish. This is the liberation that cannot be earned, because it was never absent. It was only hidden by the illusion of time. Have you ever wondered what happens to the witness when the truth of pure awareness fully reveals itself? At first, the practice of witnessing feels like the greatest discovery. You step back from your thoughts, your emotions, your sensations, and you find a place of calm where you are no longer consumed by the storms of the mind. You feel like you've broken free, like you've discovered the secret key to peace. But if you stay with this long enough, something curious begins to happen. The position of the witness, which once felt like liberation, begins to feel heavy, almost unnecessary. You notice that maintaining the role of the one who watches requires effort, a subtle stance that separates you from life, and in the deepest recognition, even witnessing collapses. The collapse of witnessing is not a failure. It is not the loss of freedom. It is the flowering of freedom into its most natural form. To witness means there is still a gap. The witness here, the witnessed over there. There is still an observer and something being observed. The division may be gentler than before, but it is still division. And as long as there is division, there is tension. The moment awareness is recognized as what you are, that tension dissolves. You see that awareness has no need for a separate witness to uphold it. Awareness does not stand apart from experience. It is the very substance of experience itself. Imagine looking at the sky and pointing to a cloud. You say, I am watching that cloud. For a while, this feels like clarity. You are not the cloud. You are not lost in it. But what happens when you notice that the sky itself is not separate from the cloud? The cloud is not something outside of the sky. It is made of the same openness, moving within it. The act of witnessing dissolves, because there was never a real gap. In the same way, when awareness recognizes itself, the need to be the witness vanishes. There is no witness and no witnessed. There is only the seamless expanse of what island. This is the end of separation. You no longer feel like someone standing on the shore, observing the waves of thought and emotion. You realize you were never separate from the ocean in the first place. The waves, the movement, the stillness, the depths, they are all expressions of the same indivisible whole. To call yourself the witness is to imagine you are standing outside of it, but when awareness shines clearly, there is no outside. Everything is happening within the one field of being, and that field is what you are. When this recognition dawns, there is a profound relaxation. The effort to maintain the witness drops away. You don't need to hold yourself apart from life. You don't need to guard your position as the one who observes. Life flows, and you are the flow. Thoughts arise, and you are the space in which they arise. Emotions move, and you are the openness in which they move. The distinction between subject and object, self and world, dissolves into wholeness. There is only this, unbroken, seamless, whole. At first, this can be unsettling to the mind. The mind wants a reference point. It wants to say, I am here, and the world is there. It even wants to say, I am the witness, and experience is what I see. But awareness itself does not operate that way. Awareness has no center, no edge, no position. It doesn't stand back to watch. It's simply island. And in its being, everything else appears and disappears. This is why even witnessing collapses, because awareness has no need for a stance. The very idea of a stance belongs to the mind, not to what you truly are. You might wonder, if there is no witness, how can anything be known? But look closely. Is it really the witness that knows? Or is it the awareness that has always been present, even before the idea of a witness was formed? Awareness doesn't need a figure inside it to do the seeing. Seeing happens naturally, without a witness claiming it. Sounds appear, and they are heard. Thoughts appear, and they are noticed. Feelings appear, and they are felt. None of this requires a separate identity. It happens effortlessly, because awareness itself is the knowing. Once this is seen, life becomes astonishingly simple. You don't need to cling to the idea of being the observer. You don't need to repeat to yourself, I am awareness. You don't need to manage or control what arises. Awareness doesn't resist anything, nor does it grasp at anything. It allows everything to come and go, untouched, unbroken. And because you are that awareness, you discover a freedom that no practice could ever produce. The freedom of not being divided against yourself. This is what it means to realize awareness as unbroken wholeness. It's not an experience that comes and goes. It's not a state you enter. It is the natural ground of your being, the space in which all experiences appear. Whether you are calm or agitated, joyful or sorrowful, awareness remains the same. It is not improved by your peace, nor diminished by your suffering. It does not depend on any condition. It is whole, regardless of what arises. In this wholeness, the game of separation loses its power. The world is not out there anymore. It is not something you are watching from a distance. It is appearing in you, as you. The trees, the sky, the faces you see, the emotions you feel, the thoughts that pass, all of it is the movement of the same awareness. There is nothing outside of it. And when there is nothing outside, there is nothing to defend, nothing to resist. Life is simply itself, whole and complete. This realization does not make you passive. On the contrary, it frees you to respond naturally, without the weight of identity. Actions flow from the wholeness, not from a separate self trying to control outcomes. Compassion arises, not because you think you should be compassionate, but because in wholeness, there is no boundary between you and the other. Creativity flows, not because you are trying to achieve, but because expression is natural to life. Everything becomes effortless, because nothing stands apart from what island, and yet, this recognition is not something you can capture. The moment you try to claim it, I have realized awareness, I am whole, you've already stepped back into separation. The wholeness doesn't need to be declared. It doesn't need to be possessed. It doesn't need to be turned into a badge or a belief. It's simply island. The beauty of it is in its utter ordinariness. It's not somewhere else, hidden in a mystical realm. It's right here, in the ordinary flow of life. The sound of the wind, the feeling of your breath, the words on this page, all of it shining in the same unbroken awareness. So let me ask you, can you see the way the witness collapses when you stop clinging to it? Can you feel the way separation dissolves when you stop trying to be someone who is aware? Right now, in this moment, notice the awareness that is already here. It is not divided. It is not standing apart. It is not claiming to be a witness. It simply is, whole, seamless, free. This is what you are. Not the witness, not the watched, but the wholeness in which both appear. And once you see this, you cannot go back. You cannot truly believe in separation again. The illusion has lost its hold. All that remains is the simplicity of awareness, unbroken, boundless, and undeniably yours, even though it belongs to no one. The seeker's journey begins with longing, a sense that there must be more to life than the roles you play and the struggles you endure. That longing is powerful. It pulls you toward meditation, toward books, toward teachers, toward practices. It convinces you that if you can hold tightly to the words, "I am," or remain endlessly in the position of the observer, you will eventually uncover what you are looking for. And at first, this feels like progress. You experience glimpses of clarity, moments of stillness, a taste of expansion. Yet over time, something becomes clear. The journey never ends. You are always seeking, always chasing, always hoping that the next retreat, the next practice, the next repetition will finally deliver the freedom you crave. This is the trap of the seeker's path. What was meant to liberate you has become a treadmill. You keep walking, but never arrive. When you hold on to "I am" as your ultimate anchor, you unknowingly prolong the search. You think that repeating those words or clinging to the sense of being is liberation. But "I am" still carries a subtle identity. It still belongs to the realm of duality. You are still affirming that there is someone here. And as long as you believe in that someone, you also believe in the journey that someone must take. The seeker is born the moment you say, "I am." Because if you are, then you must become. And the cycle continues. The way out is not to refine the search, but to let go of it entirely. When you stop holding to "I am," the seeker dissolves. Without the seeker, the search collapses. And without the search, what remains is freedom. It is paradoxical, because everything in your conditioning tells you that freedom must be earned through effort, that realization must be attained after long discipline. You are taught from childhood that everything of value must be pursued, studied, and acquired. So you apply that same logic to awakening. You make it another goal on your checklist, something to achieve, something to own. But the truth refuses to fit into that model. The more you chase it, the further away it seems. The more effort you apply, the more restless you become. This is because freedom is not in the future. It is not the prize at the end of the path. Freedom is what remains when the path itself disappears. It comes not from attainment, but from release. Imagine a dream where you are wandering through a vast desert, searching for water. You walk endlessly, convinced that if you keep moving, you will eventually find an oasis. But in reality, you are asleep in your bed. The moment you wake, the search ends instantly. You see that the desert, the thirst, the wandering were never real. This is exactly how the seeker's journey functions. The endless search only has meaning inside the dream of identity. The moment you wake to what you truly are, you see that there was never a seeker and never a journey. Freedom comes not by finding an oasis, but by realizing you were never in the desert at all. When you stop trying to attain freedom, something profound happens. You discover that the freedom you sought was always present, quietly here beneath the effort. The silence, the awareness, the unchanging presence, it never left you. You only overlooked it because you were busy seeking. The act of striving kept you blind to what was already here. It is like searching the house frantically for your glasses, only to discover they were on your face the whole time. The search itself was the only problem. The solution was already with you. The paradox is that when you give up, you gain everything. When you release, you receive. When you stop grasping, you realize you were never lacking. This is why so many teachers have said that realization is effortless. Not because you need to be lazy or careless, but because effort belongs to the seeker, and the seeker is the very illusion that must dissolve. Effort assumes distance. It assumes there is something to travel toward, something to acquire. But the truth is closer than your own breath. It does not need to be achieved, it only needs to be recognized. And recognition happens in an instant, in the timeless now. It is not gradual, it does not take years. It is simply the collapse of the illusion that you were ever separate. The fear of letting go is strong. You may think, if I stop seeking, I will regress. I will fall back into ignorance. But this fear is another trick of the seeker. It tells you that your effort is the only thing keeping you afloat. It insists that without striving, you will lose everything. But notice how heavy the seeking feels. Notice how exhausting it is to constantly chase after awakening. The relief of letting go is not regression, but liberation. When you drop the burden of the search, you finally rest. You discover a peace that is not dependent on progress or achievement. You find a freedom that does not fade because it was never earned, it simply always was. When you see clearly, you realize that you were never bound in the first place. You were only dreaming of being bound. The chains you struggled to break were made of thought. The walls you believed contained you were painted by memory and imagination. The prison was never real. Awakening is the recognition that the prison does not exist. It is not that you escape, it is that you see there was nothing to escape from. You were always free, you only believed otherwise. This recognition ends the seeker's journey instantly. There is nowhere to go, nothing to achieve, nothing to become. There is only the presence that has always been here, untouched by the dream of seeking. Think of how different life feels when you no longer carry the weight of becoming. You do not need to become awakened, you do not need to become enlightened, you do not need to become more spiritual. You can live from the simplicity of what island. You can enjoy the flow of each moment without measuring it against a goal. You can let go of the anxious hope that tomorrow will bring what today lacks. Because when the search ends, you realize that nothing is lacking. The fullness of this moment is complete. It needs no improvement, no polishing, no attainment. This is freedom. It is not dramatic. It is not an achievement to display. It is quiet, simple, always here. The seeker resists this truth because it craves drama. It wants awakening to be spectacular, to come with fireworks and visions, to mark a clear before and after. But freedom is too ordinary for the seeker's taste. It is not an experience that can be owned or retold. It is not an event in time. It is the recognition that everything, even the search, even the failure, even the longing, has always been happening within the unchanging presence. The seeker wants to arrive, awareness knows it has never left. The seeker wants to attain, awareness knows it has never lacked. This is the paradox. You only find what you already are when you stop trying to find it. So let yourself rest, let go of the idea that you must hold on to I am, or maintain the position of observer. Let go of the belief that one more practice, one more retreat, one more repetition will finally bring you home. You are already home. The only journey was the dream of being away. And the moment you stop seeking, the moment you stop grasping, the dream dissolves. What remains is what has always been, the unshakable presence that needs no affirmation, no identity, no progress. That is freedom, that is the end of the seeker's journey, and when you see it, you realize you were never bound, only dreaming of being bound. Have you ever considered what it would feel like if everything you've been chasing, everything you've been seeking, suddenly burst open in front of you with such clarity that there was no question left to ask? Up until now, your path has been filled with steps, techniques, concepts, and positions. You've learned to step back as the witness. You've practiced resting in the sense of, I aim. You've taken up labels that seemed sacred and set them down when you realized they were still part of the trap. But what happens when all of it dissolves in an instant? What happens when there is no witness to maintain, no phrase to repeat, no stance to hold, and reality itself explodes into view? This is not something that unfolds as a gradual climb, not a process that takes you from one rung of the ladder to the next. It is sudden, immediate, undeniable. Reality is not waiting for you to polish yourself into worthiness. It is already here, alive and shining. And the moment you stop seeking it, it reveals itself in its entirety. Pure being is not abstract, and it is not hidden in a future you must reach. It is the immediacy of this moment, the undeniable aliveness of what already island. It has nothing to do with a character watching life unfold, because there is no observer left. The observer was a useful mask, but in the explosion of reality, it is burned away. What remains is not a stance, not a figure, not a perspective. What remains is pure being itself, awake, alive, vibrating with the fullness of existence. It does not need you to claim it. It does not need you to announce it. It simply bursts forth, as though a veil has been torn away, and the light underneath has been blinding you all along. The reason this shift feels explosive is because the mind has spent a lifetime convincing you that truth is far away, something to be earned through effort or time. You've been taught that realization is a process, a long journey filled with practices and disciplines. But the truth does not unfold as a sequence. It is seen in a flash. One moment you are entangled in seeking, the next moment you realize there is nothing to seek. One moment you are trying to hold the position of the observer. The next moment the position collapses, and reality stands naked, needing no witness. It is not that you arrive somewhere new, it is that you finally see what was here all along. This suddenness can shock you. It feels like the ground has been pulled from under your feet. The mind is disoriented, because it cannot grasp how something so vast could appear without effort, without warning, without a build-up. But the reason it feels like an explosion is because you've been standing in the middle of it your entire life, without noticing. When the seeking falls away, the obviousness of being strikes with such force that it is undeniable. You realize you never moved an inch toward truth, because truth was never absent. The seeking was like a blindfold. The moment it slips, everything is already here. This is why reality is not a process. Processes unfold in time. They require steps, stages, and progress. Reality is not in time. It is the backdrop in which time itself appears. It cannot be reached by moving forward, because it is not ahead of you. It cannot be acquired by practice, because it was never missing. The moment you see this, seeking collapses, because you understand that the very act of seeking is the only thing hiding what island. The explosion happens not when you achieve something, but when you stop moving entirely and allow the immediacy of being to reveal itself. How does it feel? It feels like the most natural thing in the world. There is a freshness to it, as though life has been washed clean of the dust of concepts and labels. You look around and everything appears vibrant, alive, as if lit from within. The ordinary is no longer ordinary. A bird flying past, the feeling of your breath, the sound of silence, all of it glows with the undeniable truth of being, and there is no one standing apart to claim it. There is no observer saying, "I am experiencing this explosion of reality." The observer has dissolved, and in its place, there is only life itself, shining freely without division. This is the shift from seeking to resting. Seeking always assumes that what you want is somewhere else, sometime else, something else. Resting means you have recognized there is nowhere else to go. Resting is not laziness or passivity. It is the end of struggle, the end of chasing shadows. You simply let life be as it is, and you discover that what you thought you needed to reach has always been present. Resting is powerful because it stops the mind's endless attempt to improve, to attain, to claim. When the movement of seeking collapses, you fall back into the immediacy of awareness itself, and reality explodes into clarity. The mind resists this truth. It wants to believe in gradual progress, because progress allows it to keep its role. As long as realization is in the future, the mind gets to stay in charge of the path. But when the truth strikes suddenly, the mind is left with nothing to do. It cannot take credit. It cannot claim ownership. The explosion of reality strips the mind of its throne, leaving only the nakedness of what island, and although this feels destabilizing at first, it is the very liberation the seeker has been craving. The end of the game, the end of postponement, the end of waiting. To taste this, you don't need to climb mountains or sit in meditation for years. You simply need to notice what is already here, before the mind adds its commentary. Pause right now. Notice the immediacy of your own being, not the thought, "I am," not the label "observer," not even the concept of awareness. just the undeniable aliveness that is here, before you say a word about it. This aliveness is not something you do, it is not something you maintain, it is not fragile. It is the explosion of reality, present in every moment, overlooked only because you've been searching somewhere else. And once you recognize it, you'll see how unnecessary the seeking always was. The practices and teachings may have brought you closer to letting go, but they were never the destination. The truth was never hidden, it was simply obscured by the assumption that it was elsewhere. When this assumption collapses, the immediacy of being is so overwhelming, so obvious, that it feels as though the entire world has been reborn. Nothing has changed, yet everything is different. So let me ask you, what if the very thing you've been waiting for is already saturating this moment? What if reality is not a journey you walk toward, but the ground beneath your feet right now? The explosion of reality is not dramatic in the way the mind imagines. It is not fireworks in the sky or visions of light. It is the ordinary, seen without filters. It is the extraordinary hidden in the simplest of things, revealed the moment you stop searching and rest in what already island. When the weight of identity finally falls away, something unexpected happens. Life does not stop. The body still wakes in the morning, breath still flows, conversations still unfold, and responsibilities are still carried out. But everything feels lighter, because the burden of I is no longer strapped across your shoulders. The ordinary continues, but without the constant commentary of a self trying to control, defend, or justify its place. Imagine walking through the same streets, meeting the same people, handling the same work, but without the endless voice in your head whispering, "This is about me. What will they think of me? How can I prove myself?" When identity dissolves, that voice fades into silence, and what remains is a profound simplicity. Life goes on, but it no longer revolves around the false center of I. The first thing you notice is how daily life unfolds without effort. You still move through the same routines, but the sense of a doer behind those actions is gone. Eating happens, walking happens, speaking happens, but you are no longer busy identifying as the one who eats, the one who walks, the one who speaks. Actions arise naturally, as they always have, but without the clinging sense of ownership. There is no need to defend or claim them. This freedom from identification brings a deep relaxation. You realize how much energy was spent trying to control and manipulate life to fit the story of me. With that story gone, there is only flow. The simplest activities, brushing your teeth, making tea, driving to work, become fresh and unburdened. Experiencing life from pure awareness means you begin to see without filters. When someone speaks to you, their words are heard directly, not distorted through layers of defense or interpretation. You no longer hear with the ears of someone who feels attacked, praised, or judged. You simply hear. The mind does not scramble to turn every situation into a reflection of self-worth or self-importance. There is only clarity, and in that clarity, compassion naturally arises. When another person is angry or sad, you do not take it personally, because there is no I to defend. Instead, you feel their pain directly, without separation. Compassion is not something you need to cultivate or practice. It blooms on its own when the barriers of identity fall away. Living without identity also reveals the deep ordinariness of awakening. You may have imagined that enlightenment would transform you into someone extraordinary, someone glowing with mystical power. But the truth is quieter. It is not about becoming someone greater. It is about no longer needing to be someone at all. You still laugh, you still make mistakes, you still feel emotions, but without the heavy overlay of judgment. There is no longer a character running in the background insisting, "I should be this, I shouldn't be that, I must always appear spiritual." Life is simply lived. Emotions come and go like weather, thoughts arise and dissolve like clouds, and awareness remains untouched. Freedom is not about escaping the ordinary but about embracing it fully, without the weight of identity. The simplicity of this way of being is profound. Decisions are no longer paralyzed by fear of failure, because there is no self-image to protect. You move naturally toward what feels aligned, and if it works, it works. If it fails, it fails. Either way, awareness remains unshaken. In relationships, you no longer carry the hidden agenda of needing to be validated, admired, or respected. You meet others as they are, in the moment, without expectation. This creates a space of openness where love can flow freely, not as possession or need, but as the natural radiance of being. Relationships become less about control and more about connection. You no longer need others to confirm your identity, because identity itself has dissolved. As identity falls away, compassion deepens not only toward others but also toward yourself. You see clearly that all the struggles, all the mistakes, all the clinging of the past came from misunderstanding. You were dreaming of being separate, and in that dream, you suffered. But now you see that the suffering was never personal. It was only the result of believing in a self that did not exist. This realization brings forgiveness. You forgive yourself for being caught in the illusion, and you forgive others for being caught in theirs. Compassion flows naturally when there is no I to stand apart and judge. Life becomes softer, gentler, because the fight to uphold an identity has ended. In this state of pure awareness, freedom emerges as a natural fragrance. You are no longer bound by the compulsions of proving yourself, defending yourself, or controlling outcomes. Freedom is not about escaping life. It is about no longer being enslaved by the story of who you think you are. You can work, rest, love, and create, but without the chains of ego. Life is free to unfold as it will, and you are free because you no longer resist it. Even when challenges arise, they do not imprison you in fear or anger, because there is no I to be threatened. Circumstances come and go, but awareness remains open, vast, and unshaken. Simplicity also arises, because without identity, life no longer feels cluttered. The constant mental noise of comparison, judgment, and self-concern quiets down. You no longer need to project an image or maintain a role. You no longer waste energy worrying about how you are perceived. Instead, you live directly, moment by moment. Simplicity is not something you impose on life. It is what naturally shines when the unnecessary falls away. A quiet walk, a shared smile, a cup of tea, these become radiant because they are experienced without the interference of I. Life becomes enough, just as it is, without the demand for more. You may wonder if life without identity makes you passive or indifferent. But the opposite is true. Without the filters of ego, you are more present, more alive, more responsive. Action flows more naturally, because it is not hindered by hesitation or overthinking. You do what needs to be done, and then you let it go. You are not weighed down by regret about the past or anxiety about the future. Awareness guides action in the moment, and then releases it. This effortless way of living is neither passive nor aggressive. It is balanced, rooted in presence, and deeply effective. Life is lived fully, but without the suffering that identity brings. The beauty of living without identity is that nothing about the external world has to change. You may still have the same job, the same relationships, the same daily responsibilities. But the way you experience them is transformed. Without I, the job is no longer a reflection of your worth. It is simply what you do in this moment. Relationships are no longer battlegrounds of ego. They are opportunities for connection and love. Even challenges are no longer personal attacks. They are simply events unfolding in awareness. Everything continues, but the burden of I is gone. And with it, the suffering tied to identity. What emerges in its place is a life that feels lighter, freer, and more authentic. There is nothing extraordinary about it, and yet it is profoundly liberating. You wake up, you live, you move through the day, but without dragging along the heavy suitcase of identity. You rest in pure awareness, where freedom, compassion, and simplicity arise effortlessly. And in that space, you discover that the life you were chasing was never separate from the life you are already living. The only difference is that now it is free from the weight of I. Have you ever stopped to notice how even the most sacred words carry a shadow of limitation? For a time you may have found great relief in words like observer, I am, and awareness. Each seemed to carry you deeper. Each seemed to peel away another layer of illusion. And yet, if you look closely, you'll see that even the word awareness is still just a word, still a concept, still a pointer. The ultimate truth cannot be captured in letters or sounds. It cannot be contained in ideas, no matter how elevated. Every word is a signpost, not the destination. Even awareness is simply a finger pointing to the moon. And if you mistake the finger for the moon itself, you remain trapped in the final illusion. This realization can be unsettling because you want something to hold on to, something to call the truth. When the word awareness is spoken, it feels vast. It feels different from ordinary language. But notice what happens. Your mind grasps it, shapes it into a definition, and then clings to it as if it has captured reality. Yet the truth you are cannot be defined, cannot be pinned down. The moment you try to describe it, you are already looking at an echo, not the real thing. The real is beyond all words, beyond all concepts, beyond all attempts to claim it. Imagine for a moment sitting in silence with nothing to describe your experience. No labels, no affirmations, no spiritual mantras, just the raw immediacy of being here. At first, your mind will scramble to name it, to say, this is awareness, or this is presence. But if you resist the urge to speak, even inwardly, you'll begin to notice something deeper. There is a directness to reality that does not require naming. There is an aliveness that shines without needing to be wrapped in a phrase. That is what the word awareness was always pointing to. Not the word itself, not the concept, but the living reality that cannot be spoken. The trap is subtle. When you first discover awareness, it feels like liberation compared to being lost in thought. And for a time, calling it awareness helps you return to it. The word becomes a reminder, a doorway. But eventually, even that doorway must be left behind. Because the moment you say, I am awareness, you have already stepped back into identity. You have already created a self that owns awareness. And awareness itself needs no owner. It does not need to be claimed. It's simply island. This is why the sages often say that the ultimate truth is unspeakable. Not because it is hidden, but because it is too immediate to be captured. Words create distance. They turn what is here, now, into something that can be talked about, something that seems separate from you. But the real is not separate. It does not sit across from you, waiting to be described. It is you. It is this moment. It is the very being in which words arise and dissolve. To cling even to the word awareness is to create a subtle veil over what is already shining. Think of it like this. You can describe the taste of honey to someone for hours, using beautiful language and poetic images. But no matter how refined your words, they will never be the taste itself. The taste is wordless, direct, undeniable. In the same way, awareness is a description, but the living essence is beyond description, and until you set down the words, you cannot fully taste the real. This is the final illusion, the belief that by holding on to the most refined concept, you've arrived at truth. But the truth does not require holding. It reveals itself only when there is nothing left to cling to. When even the word awareness falls silent, what remains is the living reality it pointed toward. You do not need to say it. You do not need to name it. You do not need to capture it. It shines by itself, without support, without explanation. And what is it like to fall into this wordless being? It is like resting after lifetimes of struggle. It is like breathing without effort, like being carried by an unseen current that has always been moving beneath you. There is no need to define yourself, no need to declare what you are. The mind may rise up with words, but you no longer confuse them for truth. They are ripples on the surface. The depths remain untouched, silent, whole. Falling into wordless being does not mean rejecting language in daily life. You will still use words to communicate, to navigate, to live. But inside, you know that none of them touch the essence. You know that all words are tools, temporary and limited. And because you no longer confuse them with reality, you are free. You can say awareness when it helps, and you can let it go when it is no longer needed. You can speak of presence, silence, truth, love, but deep down you know that these are only reflections, never the real light. In this way, you live with a kind of lightness. You are no longer burdened by the need to name or define yourself. You don't need to repeat, I am awareness, to feel secure. You don't need to cling to any mantra or teaching. You simply rest in the immediacy of being, letting words come and go like birds across the sky. And in that resting, life reveals itself as more vivid than ever. The taste of food, the sound of laughter, the feeling of wind on your face, all of it is known directly, without being trapped in concepts. The mind may protest. It will say, "But without words, how will I know what I am? Without concepts, how can I hold on to the truth?" The answer is simple. You don't need to hold on to it. You cannot lose what you are. The truth is not fragile. It does not depend on words to keep it alive. It is the ground of being, ever present, indestructible. The mind is afraid of silence, but the silence is where freedom waits. So let me ask you, are you willing to release even the most precious word? Are you willing to let go of awareness itself and fall into the unspeakable? If you are, you will discover a depth that no concept can reach. You will discover that the ultimate truth is not something you can say, not something you can define, but something you can only be. Wordless, centerless, infinite. In the end, every teaching, every phrase, every mantra is just a raft. It can carry you across the river, but once you've arrived on the other shore, you no longer need to carry the raft on your back. You thank it, and you let it go. The same is true for awareness. It has served as a guide, but to cling to it forever is to weigh yourself down. To step into the fullness of truth, you must leave it behind and rest in the silence that has always been here. And in that silence, you will see that nothing has been lost. On the contrary, everything is more radiant, more alive, more whole. Because finally, you are no longer looking at life through the filter of a word. You are no longer standing apart, describing. You are simply being. And that being is the truth that cannot be spoken, the truth that needs no name, the truth that was here before language and will remain after every word fades into silence. From the very beginning of your journey, you were told to look within, to find that still point behind the noise of thought. At first, you discovered the power of identifying as the observer, a position that seemed to free you from the chaos of the mind. Then you were guided to the feeling of I am, the raw sense of existence that appears each morning with waking. These were valuable steps. They gave you glimpses of stillness and presence. But as you now see, even these subtle positions can become prisons. The observer is still a role. The I am is still tied to time and memory. And even the concept of awareness can be transformed into another identity the ego clings to. The journey was never about adopting these labels. It was about seeing through them, one after another, until nothing remained to cling to. What you discover at the end is not a new definition of yourself, it is the absence of every definition. The greatest illusion is that you are something, anything at all. From childhood, you were given identities to wear like garments. You were told, you are this gender, this nationality, this personality type. Later, you adopted spiritual garments. I am the observer, I am awareness, I am pure consciousness. Each label seemed closer to the truth than the last, but each was still a mask. The masks became thinner, more transparent, but they were masks nonetheless. The reality is that you are not even awareness as an idea, because the word awareness is still a thought, and what you are cannot be contained in thought. What you are is the unnameable presence in which thought, identity, and experience rise and fall. This realization is not something distant. It is not waiting for you in the future, once you have meditated enough, or chanted enough, or purified yourself enough. It is here now, as it has always been. The very attempt to reach it only obscures it, because it creates the illusion of a seeker separate from the truth. When the search collapses, the truth shines by itself. You see that you were never bound, never lacking, never separate. You were only dreaming of being bound, dreaming of being a seeker, dreaming of being an identity moving through time. The dream can feel convincing, but once you wake, you laugh at its fragility. The chains were never real. They were woven out of thought and belief. What you are has always been free. Do not try to hold this realization as an idea, because even that becomes another form of bondage. The moment you say, I understand, I have realized, I know I am timeless presence, you have already turned it into another mask. The truth is not something you can possess. It is not something you can describe or repeat. It is only what remains when the need to describe, possess, or repeat falls away. It is the silence before words, the stillness before thought, the space before identity. It cannot be claimed, because it is what you already are. To claim it is to miss it. To rest in it is to let go of every attempt to define it. In the timeless presence, life continues as it always has. The body moves, breath flows, words are spoken, emotions appear and dissolve. But nothing sticks, because there is no I to own them. Awareness shines, but even to call it awareness feels like too much. It is simply what island, it is the nameless ground of everything, and yet it cannot be pointed to, because there is no outside of it. You cannot grasp it because you are it. You cannot lose it because you have never been apart from it. Every attempt to locate it in time fails, because it is beyond time. Every attempt to define it in thought fails, because it precedes thought. Every attempt to claim it as an identity fails, because it dissolves the moment identity arises. This is why the teachings lead you step by step only to strip each step away. First you are shown that you are not your thoughts. Then you are shown that you are not your roles. Then you are shown that you are not even the observer, not even the I am, not even awareness as an idea. Each pointer removes a layer, until you are left with nothing to hold on to, and in that nothing, you recognize the fullness that was always here. The end of the journey is not the gaining of something new, but the loss of every illusion. What remains is the presence that cannot be spoken, cannot be taught, cannot be turned into a method. It's simply island. To live from this recognition is not to withdraw from life or float in abstraction. It is to live fully, but without the burden of identity. It is to laugh, to love, to create, to rest, without needing to attach a story to any of it. Life becomes lighter, because it is no longer filtered through the lens of me. You no longer need to defend yourself, prove yourself, or complete yourself. You simply are, and that is enough. Freedom, compassion, and simplicity emerge naturally when the illusion of I dissolves. They are not practices you must cultivate, but qualities that shine when the obstruction is gone. The call now is simple. Rest in the unnameable truth. Stop chasing labels, even the most sacred ones. Stop trying to fix your identity with spiritual concepts. See that what you are cannot be captured in words or held in thought. Let go of the belief that you must become something, and let go of the belief that you are something. You are not the observer, not the I am, not even awareness as an idea. You are the timeless presence in which all of these appear, and once you recognize this, you can rest. The search is over. The dream of separation dissolves. What remains is what has always been, unchanging, infinite, beyond name or form. That is the truth of who you are, and it is here now.